as we fade in. Are you looking well this morning? You look shaved and
Not bad. Oh yeah,
you
I
kind of
shaved.
scraped a bit of that dirt off there, and all the nose hairs are facing in the right direction. So
Yeah,
good,
I
very
even
nice,
combed them. I combed
excellent,
them and shampooed them just for
good.
you and just for Easter.
Thank
Happy
you. So,
Easter. Joyeuse Pâques.
joyous Pâques to you, whichever Pâques you're celebrating. And I wore my pink, my well, it's not pink, it's salmon. My pink,
Yeah, it's salmon.
my
Yep.
salmon shirt from
Salmon
Simon's.
spots.
My Simon's salmon shirt.
Is that brand new?
It's been sitting in my closet for weeks now. I was going to wear it when I was going to leave the house, but now that I can't leave the house, I'm wearing it in the house
Well, I'm glad you're wearing something in the house, and salmon seems to be the perfect color
for
for
Easter.
Easter with the
Yeah,
hope of spring. And I remember a bit of what you were talking about yesterday about Ted Rogers and CFTO and all that stuff. And I checked out a few other things about Toronto radio, if I can share a little bit with you.
please. I took up all the
Okay.
time yesterday. I've got a couple little things, but we talk about that after you're done.
Okay.
There you
Well,
go.
first of all, there
There's
is
Mason.
Mason Adams,
Yep.
who played Charlie Hume. That was the name I was trying to think of. I knew his name, but his name in the Lou Grant show was Charlie Hume, and he was the editor. There is the man with the $100,000 voice, whom you mentioned yesterday, Joel
Yes.
Aldrich.
Joel Aldred.
And not, those were the days when the $100,000 voice was real money. And he did well in radio. He was one of the founders of CFTO television, right? Along with
Yes,
Ted
with Ted
Rogers
Rogers. Yep.
and this man, Johnny Bassett.
Of course.
He was part of that deal too. Baton Broadcasting, they
Mm-hmm.
called it BBS
Mm-hmm.
for a while, and CFTO.
Yep.
And it really was a license to print money. They got, along with CFCF, two of the first private TV stations in Canada. I guess and quite a bit earlier, one was the one in Sudbury, CKCSO, right?
CKSO. I think so. Yes,
53.
CKSO, which Sudbury's my hometown. One of the first stations to go color in the country. Yeah, it was big time stuff in those days.
And I can't believe in 1953, where I guess they weren't served by CBC at all. And I
But
was wondering why.
CKSO was what they called a twin stick operation at the time. They broadcast CBC and CTV.
Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
stations did that. Channel 5 in Plattsburgh, New York used to be NBC and ABC because there
Right.
was no ABC stations. Then you mentioned there
There's
is Ted
Ted.
Rogers,
Yep.
and his father was the founder, who died at a very young age, died in 1939, was the founder of CFRB Radio, which is the sister station of CJAD, and RB stands for Rogers Battery. You've talked a lot about Canadian pioneers in radio, like Reginald Fessenden
Yes.
and
Because I like to say Fessenden
Fessenden.
on radio.
Well,
I
it
thought
was
that RB, and forgive me, I thought that RB stood for radio batteryless
okay. It may have been that,
because
but
it
it
would
may, or it may
they
have
were
been Rogers Batteryless. Anyway, he's the
could be
guy who
they were
invented the
crystal
battery
sets in
system.
those days. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
But he was the inventor and the starter of the station. And talk about again another license to print money.
Yeah.
And here's a guy.
Oh yes.
People in Montreal probably won't really recognize him, but he was on CFRB for 50 years
Wally Crowder.
doing the morning show. I don't know, Wally Crowder.
Yep.
And Wally's obviously going through the 70s and early 80s in that one. But he started there in 1946.
Yeah. 1010.
And,
That was huge radio. And Betty
oh,
Kennedy was on there.
Betty Kennedy,
Yep.
Gordon Sinclair.
Gordon Sinclair, and people used to dress. I remember, forgive me, I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent here. We used to listen to 590 CKEY when I was
Mhm.
living in Toronto back in the 60s with my parents. And that was McLean Hunter radio in those days.
That's
And
right.
I remember taking a tour of CKEY, and they had guys like Keith Rich doing a show called Star Time. And Keith would come in with a blazer and a shirt, sometimes a tie to do a show. And they would do their
Yeah.
shifts and then go
Nice.
home. It
Yeah.
was quite something. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how Wally Crowder did it. I did morning radio for a number of years, and you did it as
Yep,
well.
I did it
I don't
on
know
many
how he did it for
stations.
50 years.
Yeah,
Anyway,
it's quite the mold you got to stick your face in for sure.
he was immensely popular.
Yep.
And when CBC television went on the air in 1952, September the 8th in Toronto, a couple of days after CBFT went on the air here in Montreal, and CBFT was a bilingual operation. Then it was both English and French until CBMT went on the air in 54. But CBLT was started in Channel 9,
Oh,
and they
I'd
moved
forgotten
it.
about that. Yeah,
Yeah, well, and they moved it to Channel 6
Channel 6. Yeah.
in 1956 because it was starting to get rolling that CFTO was going to get going. And I think they were making some accommodation for CFTO in those days. And some days you just have a bad day. This was the station identification on CBLT
Oh
in
yeah.
Toronto. I don't know if you ever were in their myriad rabbit warren of
Yes,
studios
years
on
and years
Jarvis
and years
Street.
ago. Yes, I
Yeah,
was
I mean they
there.
have
I
this
as
big national broadcasting center
a
now, which is now
school
more than
tour.
25 years old.
Yeah, you
I
know
mean,
that Mr. Rogers started in Canada.
that's right.
Yeah, that's
Along with Mr. Dressup,
yeah,
they
with
worked together for a while. Then
Ernie
Mr.
Coombs.
Rogers
Yeah,
went back to Pittsburgh.
right.
But
That's right.
that's right. He started in
Yep,
Toronto.
yep.
And there was a story, and I may have told it before, but I love telling it. They had, I believe it was the National Ballet of Canada was doing something, and the studio was in an old girls' school on Jarvis Street, and the guy had to open a back door to pull the camera practically out onto the street to get a long shot, to get a wide shot. I gather the place was a real dump. It
It
was a
was,
pretty awful place,
yeah, but
pretty rudimentary stuff.
the stuff that came out of there, though, a lot of creative people, and I'm going to touch on that a
Yeah.
little bit too in my stuff in a second here.
Well, somebody was mentioning there was a British producer, and I can't remember who it was, but he was with the BBC, said that CBC radio in those days, national radio in the 40s and 50s, was some of the best drama produced in the world. And they had people like John Draney there, and it
Max
was
Ferguson.
Max Ferguson, of
Oh,
course,
what a
Alan
fan I
Fee.
was. My parents loved Max
Just
Ferguson. Yeah,
your
yeah.
mom and dad like Max Ferguson?
Oh, I don't know if you ever read his little
There's
autobiography.
Max. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's worth a read today. You'll be screaming with laughter. There's and he gets into a story about I can't do justice to it here, but about a technician in one city who's adjusting the volume for somebody else down the line. And one day, and he's getting used to having very, very loud background noises. So he's screaming, and one day there's no background, so he's yelling into the microphone, and nobody understands why. But it's a terrific
Oh,
story.
yes, I had
Yeah,
heard about that.
yeah,
There was also one, and I don't know if it's apocryphal, where a guy was yelling obscenities because he didn't give a damn.
yeah.
There was interference,
And then one
and then
day you're going to have to tell us the story about you and Bertie Saint Laurent almost costing the entire Canadian Broadcasting Corporation its broadcasting license.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was pretty crude stuff.
Yeah, and I want
Anyway,
to hear
there's
the joke.
CFTO in Toronto.
There it
Pardon?
is, channel. I want to hear the whole joke too, so better prepare for that.
Oh God, CFTO in Toronto. I remember driving out on the 401 going back to Montreal, and in the middle of nowhere in Scarborough was the biggest private TV station in Canada.
Yep.
And it was this one floor little dumpy place, but boy, it was a powerhouse in
Oh, they
Canadian
cranked out
broadcasting.
John Biner and Bizarre, and all
Oh,
of that came
yeah,
out of
yeah.
that building. And what's his name? Einstein there, Bob Einstein, who died a couple of
Oh
years ago.
gosh, yeah.
Um,
Dave,
Super Dave Osborne,
Super
but better
Dave
known
Osborne.
as Bob Einstein, who was on Curb Your Enthusiasm, spent months, years there shooting the John Biner Bizarre show. I think there are some clips available on YouTube. It was
He
very,
did it
very
for about
strange.
a buck a show, I think.
Absolutely, it was.
Weiner did it, and of course
Yeah,
they had stalwart Canadian actors in there,
yeah.
like Billy Van and people
And
like that.
Alan Bly was
Alan
one of the
Bly.
producers. He was in the States now too, I think. And there's also there's a clip of an older Alan Bly talking about those days too. So yeah, there was a lot of stuff coming out of that station for sure.
And remember, when this was the most popular magazine in Canada and the United States, this is the Montreal edition. My son, I mentioned it to him,
TV
asked
guide.
him if he remembered the TV guide. And this is actually in the later years, because for many, many years in Montreal, you had CBFT, Channel 6, CBMT, of course, TVA, that's TVA in Sherbrooke, it's CFTM, and then Channel 12. That was it.
Yeah.
That was it. I mean, TQS and Radio Quebec all came along a lot later. And the US channels, for many years, you got Channel 3 and 5. You needed cable to get WMTW, to get ABC, which was in Poland Springs, Maine, which is a suburb of Portland, Maine. But as I mentioned, WPTZ for a number of years, the first many years, was an ABC affiliate as well, because WVNY just didn't exist. So those
That's
go
a
back
long time ago.
long way.
I remember that
Yeah.
back in Sudbury, we had the one channel. It was Channel 5. So the tuner never moved. It stayed on Channel 5. You're sharing again. One more click there.
There you go.
And the weatherman back when I was a kid was a guy by the name of Alex Trebek.
Oh gosh, yeah. Who was a Sudbury
Who was
native
a
or North
Sudbury
Bay?
boy. His
Sudbury.
mother was a Lagacé.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
So
Yeah.
that's
And
why
he spoke French fairly well
and that's
yeah,
why
until
his
he, yeah.
pronunciation of French words is so good, because
Yeah.
he was raised in one of them bilingual households like I was. So anyway, that's a lot of fun. I guess we could go on about the nostalgia thing, and I've got a couple of things just to pick up on what we talked about yesterday. And there's Elliot. You were getting requests for. There's
Pictures
the
of
old man,
cute
Eliot.
little guy. Yeah, he's
Elliot.
14.
This is my stepdaughter's dog. Elliot's 14. Yeah, she got him when I was. I remember the first time I met him. It was at my 50th birthday party, and
That was before the war. Yeah.
that's before the war. That's 14 years ago almost. And there he is, on my lap. He's and there's a younger looking Elliot here who was the subject for this particular illustration, which my spouse had done for my stepdaughter. And this is done by a young woman by the name of Lisa George. And she specializes in pet illustrations. You'll find her on Instagram at illustration.lisa.g. And
she certainly captured Elliot's soul.
Yeah,
That's beautiful.
Yeah, she makes use of photographs, and she works in oil, in acrylic, watercolor rather, and acrylic, and she specializes in pet illustrations. So that's illustration.lisa.g. And I just want to cover.
I always wonder about that characteristic look dogs give you when they cock their head like that, and all they're really thinking about is food.
They're thinking,
right?
Okay,
You think
do I smell a ham sandwich or somewhere? Did you touch a bagel before you came into the room? So, and I just want to cover off a little bit. I'm getting questions about this piece that was aired many, many years ago, The Fashion Men, where I was dressed in a gold lamé dress.
Oh my God.
And I want to mention again, we talked about Joe Settlemeyer yesterday and about getting people to participate in all of these things. We were doing this 30 years ago. And this woman's name is Linda Kidney. I sent her a Facebook message a couple of weeks ago. Haven't received a reply. I hope she's okay. She was one of the many people who participated. And let me give you a bit of background. It's perhaps not very clear. There's no intro in the YouTube. I should have written more about this. It's about guys at a Legion Hall, I think it's in Lachine, if I remember correctly, who would get together and essentially dress in women's clothing and parade up and down in a fashion show and make people laugh and raise money for charity. It seems to some as anathema in this day and age, but it was great fun. And there's a CBC makeup guy who was doing makeup for me. But what is important to remember here is that there are producers and editors behind all of this. And this dress that they were zipping up on me around that time was procured by someone you and I knew over the years, a guy by the name of Peter de Castel,
Oh,
who was
Peter
in.
was the one who got the dress. If
Oh
anybody could
yes,
get a
look at
dress that was 6 feet tall, it would
yeah,
be
look at
Peter.
this. Look at this thing. And Peter
God.
procured that. Peter was in the costume department at CBC. Are you the one who called it the Enchanted Forest, or was he?
No, Peter did.
Peter called. He
Peter
was
called
one
it
of the
the Enchanted
funniest,
Forest.
most charming, brightest, most talented
Yeah.
people we knew. He's long gone now, but it took people like Peter. And if you look at the dress, these panels that were all sewn in, the
My
so-called flesh
God.
colored, and the bust was just perfect, and it fit me to a T. And I had like size 11 gold shoes on,
A
and
boa.
it was and a boa. And of course, all of these people got together 2 weeks before the actual show took place. So you have to get the folks together. You have to get them sort of primed up. And they were just a bunch of lovely folks and played along. And these sequences were all shot about 2 weeks before the final. But again, you need people to produce this. And this report was produced by a woman by the name of Maureen Marovich. I worked with Maureen over several years. She's very talented, and I'll tell you a little bit more about her
You're
in
no
a minute.
dancer, pal.
I'm no dancer. I'm no nothing here. Uh,
This guy looks frightened to death.
yeah, that's right. And of course, at the end, they put on the show, and the whole plot is I'm so good looking, they're afraid I'm going to win, so they tie me up to the basement. They tie me onto a pipe in the basement, and that was shot 2 weeks before the actual show again. But um, I'm simply going over this to remind people that there are directors and producers and editors. And of course, you have to think about bringing the rope to tie the guy to the pipe and all of these things.
Where
And
did they
shout
shoot
out,
that? Was that in the basement of the
that was in the
Radcan? Or
basement. No, that was in the basement of the Legion Hall.
oh,
So,
it wasn't the Legion. You did
yeah,
it
so
there
we
too.
arrived there,
Well, of course,
with
yeah.
all full of ideas and camera people and lights, and we tried to explain to them what we want to do. And they were absolutely lovely. And this is Maureen here. This is she and her partner David Finch own a company called Picture This Productions. They've been in business since 1995. They're very, very, very skilled people, and I don't know the rest of their crew here, but Maureen and David I know. They do documentaries. They've won awards. They also have a corporate division too. They've had a corp division now for about 10 years, I think. So they do all kinds of product videos and viral campaigns and all kinds of corporate things. So if you need work done professionally by some of the best folks in the business, I suggest you contact Picture This. So I just wanted to give them a plug this morning. And I started watching this morning, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's a
And
Tarantino movie. It's a lot of fun. I'm only about 15 minutes in. I'm already smiling because Al Pacino is in the movie, so I'll watch
oh,
Al Pacino read the back of a Campbell's soup can, and I really like him a lot. But this is a lot of fun, and the movie line of the day is "Don't cry in front of the Mexicans." So this is what Brad Pitt is saying to DiCaprio right here. Don't cry in front of the Mexicans. So that's the line that I'm going to stick on my forehead for this morning.
do you like DiCaprio and
I like that they're together. They're absolutely terrific. And coming up on Wednesday, I just want to. I'm lining up folks to join us. I don't want to mention names until I have their permission and have them lined up. But Billy Amos, you know Bill Amos,
oh,
don't you?
of course, he's out in BC now. He's
Out
been
in
there for years.
BC. He teaches journalism at the British Columbia Institute of Technology in Burnaby. He's been out there for a long time. I kind of followed in Bill's footsteps because he left CFCF Radio when I arrived in '81, and then he left Newswatch, and I kind of stepped into his shoes at Newswatch a few years thereafter. And Bill's a good guy, bright guy, has been in the business for a long time. So we're going to have him on Wednesday, probably.
Oh, great!
And,
I've talked to Bill quite a lot on Facebook.
and
Wonderful man.
Yeah,
Wonderful man.
he's got a lot of opinions, so it should be an entertaining conversation, I'm sure, and other guests to be announced in the coming days. So there you are. That's my bit for today.
The
This
Easter
Easter
edition.
Sunday. Yeah. There
Well,
you go.
good. I'm glad we had a lot of light stuff to put out there for
Yeah.
folks. We know we're all going through good days and some really bad days, and
Yeah.
we got to hold on to each other tight and wish each other happy holidays, and enjoy them when we can.
Absolutely.
I've got a Zoom family get together coming up in about a half hour's time.
We
So
did that yesterday around 1 o'clock, and we had folks, my sister in Europe and my mother in Toronto, and the nieces and nephews and great nieces and nephews in Ottawa, and so it
Oh,
was a
wow.
nice, yeah,
Big
yeah,
crowd.
yeah.
How's your mom?
She's fine. I'd probably like to get her on as a guest too in the next
I'd
couple of
love to
weeks.
see her.
She would
I
love
haven't
to do
seen
that.
her in years. So,
She's quite adept at 87. There, she's skyping and
oh,
zooming, and
good for her.
yeah.
Wow. Okay,
So
so I'm going to find out how technologically advanced my family is in
okay,
about a half hour's time.
that should be good. It's a lovely day. Enjoy it. We'll talk tomorrow.
Yeah, à demain. Happy Easter. Joyeuse Pâques.